Hi again, all. This is Maylone's video lecture number 2 for EDPS 340. I'm still learning the ropes of video lecturing, but let's give it a try again. Before you view this lecture, you should view the first one that I sent you, I think, yesterday. A short 10-minute video on the characteristics of standardized testing. Today we're going to continue with a look at standardized testing. Try to keep this under 15 minutes, sort of bite size. I'll have you pause now and then to take a look at a link or two or something in the course pack, so be ready for that. Wouldn't hurt to pause briefly and look at page 106 in the course pack, so do that right now and we'll come right back. Alrighty, you'll know on page 106 that we have a hint at what I call the nefarious history of standardized testing. If you could believe it, as late as 1960, as noted on that page, those illustrations were accompanied by test item questions that asked, if you're ready, which man is handsome and which girl is pretty. And those were considered legitimate parts of standardized intelligence tests. Now that's pretty sad, I would say. I hope you would agree. Notice that even though there's a copyright of 1960, those drawings are decades older than that. So that's just a total mess anyway. But without going too much into the history of standardized testing, you could do that on your own if you were ever interested. What we want to do is get practical and talk about the way that the test publishers for the big standardized tests tend to report back to you, the teachers, and other educators and the students and the parents, results of the test. So that's mainly what we're going to do in this lecture. Might spill over into another lecture soon. You already know a bit about the bell curve, and we have to keep talking about the bell curve to talk about standardized tests. You'll remember that, gosh, I hope that shows up. Yeah, that seems to show up pretty well. We've discussed the fact that the bell curve happens. Wouldn't that make a good bumper sticker? The bell curve happens, yeah. And it's good for all sorts of things in nature and in sociology. For instance, if we were to somehow get the height of everyone on campus, every undergrad. Well, no one's on campus right now, but you get the idea. And then graph the score distribution. So maybe this is what, in the middle, the mean 5.8 or 5.7. You would find that as we graphed how many folks are at each height, we would get the bell curve. Also mentioned, this was in relation to the SLA assignment in particular, that your goal as a teacher is to beat, or shall we say defeat, the bell curve, to push the peak of the score distribution toward 100. So we already touched on that a little bit. But what I want to talk about now is in relation to standardized testing. And what's interesting, that's not quite the smooth bell curve I wanted, but pretend that's symmetrical. What I want to remind you of from the other day is that the score distribution for standardized tests is by definition the bell curve. And if you say, well, how do the test people know that they're going to get the bell curve? They know. Remember, the test is given to many students, and group behavior is to some degree predictable. So we know we always get the bell curve. There'll be a few students who do very poorly. There'll be a few students who do really well, and a whole lot of students who just score somewhere in the middle. That is really typical for a standardized test. Now that's done on purpose because the purpose of a standardized test is not to determine mastery of the domain. Remember that lecture from a few weeks ago? When you write a test for your students in class, you're attempting to find out if they've mastered the material or curricular outcomes. That's not the way it works for most standardized tests. Most standardized tests are trying to find out where students rank compared to all other students who took the test. Hence, we're always referring to the bell curve. What we're going to do now is look at, again, getting somewhat practical, we're going to look at some, at least one big test, big standardized test sample score sheet, because these are the kind of score sheets you're going to get as teachers, whether or not you administer standardized tests. You will very likely get these, certainly from, I would say, second or third grade on. Understand that there is no mandated standardized test nationwide in the U.S. anyway. Certainly statewide, we give the M-step, and we can talk about that later. But understand that state by state, even sometimes district by district, different standardized tests are given. And standardized tests are not free. Someone's got to pay for them. You may know the two biggest in the country are the ACT and the SAT, which are typically given to 11th graders. And theoretically, the results show their readiness for college. One of the big ones given to many grade levels is the Iowa. That's been around a long time. Yours truly took the Iowa about 100 years ago in many different grades. So I'm going to ask you to pause and go to the link I sent you via an email that will take you to a sample Iowa assessment sheet. So I'm going to pause and let you do that. All right, that sheet no doubt looks pretty intimidating to you with all the numbers and the bars and what have you. Actually, it should, because there's an awful lot of data there. And in fact, you don't have to be concerned with all of it when you're a teacher. We're going to concentrate on the upper box for a few minutes. So what I'm going to do is tell you about the typical ways that the big test companies report scores back to teachers. So let me pause and get a new sheet up on my so-called whiteboard.